Tuesday, October 24th version of the Lane County Board of Commissioners regular meeting. We have a couple of things on the agenda this afternoon, Mr. Mokrahasky. We'll dive straight into it. On item 10A, we have a report on Lane County broadband update and overview. And if the panel could step forward, Mr. Mokrahasky, I'll turn it over to you to introduce your panel.
I think I'll give my, do you want to come up? Okay. Mike Finch, our Chief Information Officer, is here, and our partners from LCOG to talk about broadband. So, Mike, take it away.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come share with the board an update on broadband in Lane County. Broadband is listed in our strategic plan under robust infrastructure, and as we know today, broadband today is no longer just a nice to have, right? It's critical infrastructure that evens the playing field for access to education, health, jobs, and just basic communication and connection to family and friends. And at this time, there are thousands of homes, schools, and businesses that are unserved by broadband in Lane County, and thousands more that are underserved. Where there is service, affordability is often another consideration for access into that. And certainly in the last 3.5 years, we've all come to realize just how essential this service is. And to that end, we've seen billions of dollars in federal funding through multiple programs that have been committed to help closing the gaps where we don't have broadband across our nation. And so joining us today is our partner, Lane Council of Governments, who we just introduced, to provide an update on planning and coordination that's going on in our region with regard to this work. And from here, I'm going to hand it over to Keith and Jake, who are from LCOG, to introduce themselves and take us through an update.
Thank you, Mike. Commissioners, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here and share some of the progress that has been made around broadband. Really appreciate the partnership that we've had with your staff. We'll get into that a little bit more. I'm Jacob Collister. I'm a principal planner at the Lane Council of Governments. Some of you may remember Milo Meacham. I have assumed a lot of the roles that Milo Meacham played when it came to regional broadband. We're going to talk a little bit more about the specifics that we're into, but that's me. I'll let Keith introduce himself.
Thanks, Jake. My name is Keith Testerman. I am the Data Center and Systems Manager at Lane Council of Governments. I manage the Park Place Interconnect, which was formerly WIX, as a lot of you may have known it. For a lot of reasons, we changed that name to make us more in alignment with the standard in the industry. But I also play a role in IT as well as broadband planning here for LCOG.
Also want to acknowledge Michael Wist, who is our division director and deserves a round of applause. We brought him along to be our bouncer and moral support, and he's participated a lot in this work as well. So we've had a good team assembled. The progress that we've made in broadband has only been possible with the close partnership of Lane County. We've worked very closely with your staff in information technology and economic development and in emergency management. As with so many other areas, understanding the real progress around broadband has and will continue to require these types of strong partnerships. Before going too much further, I want to make sure that anyone watching and listening understands that LCOG operates as an ORS Chapter 190 organization. That what essentially means is that for most intents and purposes, we are a public entity. We operate under the direction of a board. Commissioner Buck is the chair of our board, and we work with the governments in the county. We really work shoulder to shoulder with our public partners like Lane County. We're going to give some brief overview of updates of our overall regional broadband strategic planning process, but we're really going to focus our time today, this afternoon, on one specific action item that has emerged that we want to really focus your attention on. So next slide. You may already be familiar with some of the ways that LCOG fits into the region's broadband planning context, but we thought it would be helpful to give you a brief overview of some of LCOG's broadband-related roles, initiatives, and activities, maybe a refresher. Two key existing broadband network coordinating entities in the region are the Regional Fiber Consortium and the Public Agency Network, PAN as it's often referred to. We won't go into significant detail about these, but they are two entities that coordinate regularly around a mix of private and public connectivity opportunities and initiatives. LCOG provides staffing for both of these groups, and Lane County is an active participant in both of these groups. LCOG owns and operates what is called an interconnection facility in our primary offices here in downtown Eugene. This is a space where any telecommunications provider who wants to contribute to the connective fabric in our region can do so. This is crucial to a healthy broadband ecosystem. The facility's existence and operation plays a central role in both public and private network connectivity in our region. The facility's success directly supports many of the broadband opportunities that we have in our region today. LCOG also manages a wholesale consortium that provides internet service providers, or ISPs, with high bandwidth connectivity to larger internet markets. We call this our middle mile. Lane County was actually an active participant in making that middle mile possible about 5 years ago, and so is a key partner in that effort. LCOG also, the number of internet service providers actively competing for customers in our county has at least doubled in the last decade, in part because of the middle mile opportunity. It really broke a barrier for a lot of providers in our area. Finally, LCOG helps coordinate and facilitate joint broadband planning efforts, mutual interest agreements, and LCOG helps coordinate special projects and initiatives. You'll see a key example of this afternoon. Some of these roles and activities are really clearly defined, and others have emerged in response to evolving needs, and that evolution continues. This is a picture of our newest room over at our facility. We welcome any of the commissioners to take us up on an offer to go take a look at that room. It now has a lot more flashing lights and cables running back and forth and lots of noise in there. And it really is it's a heartbeat of the community broadband. It's a pretty impressive site. We'd love to show anybody that facility just across the park blocks here. Next slide. This is another slide. I won't go into a tremendous amount of detail, but want to give the board an even broader sense for coordination that's happening around broadband aligned efforts in the region. The focus of these groups is somewhat varied, whether it's IT, security and application provision, or economic and community development, or emergency management. The common element that runs through all these groups is a direct benefit from reliable high-speed internet. So their objectives all benefit from the efforts to realize our region's vision, goals, and tactics around broadband. I will address these shortly. The county participates in every one of the groups that you see here in some manner. And I have potentially missed a group that I missed here that has that same shared goal. Next slide. So last year, LCOG, with regional partner support, set aside Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act, or CRSA, funds to support a regional broadband strategic planning process. Our process was scoped by regional partners and was built on historic regional work sessions and scoping efforts. I remember Commissioner Buck specifically participating in some very extensive work sessions that really were the building blocks for our scope for this. The process started last fall and was divided into two phases. Phase one pursued a baseline characterization of broadband speeds and coverage in the county. It took the form of promoting and supporting speed testing efforts, assembling relevant local, state, and national data layers, and actively engaging in the FCC's most recent broadband mapping process. That process involved a lot of engagement, and LCOG led a formal challenge of over 1,000 potential broadband locations. So we challenged the FCC's map and said, based on our information, you've got these particular locations wrong, and we were able to make an impact on those maps. Every location that we add is dollars to our county, and so that was a big win for us. Presently, we're in the early stages of phase two, where we hope to align some initial focus with funding opportunities. Another piece of Phase 2 will be advancing our region's long-standing need to improve regional coordination around things like Dig Once policies, better and more coordinated mapping and documentation, and more efficient management of publicly owned broadband assets. Next slide. So, at the heart of our strategic planning process is a regionally shared vision, goals, and tactics. These were vetted and endorsed by numerous public partners and were presented to the county board 2 years ago. They have provided consistent guidance and focus for our process. So I'm going to share them here. The vision, as was stated, was to maximize outside fundings secured by Lane County agencies and partners to address unmet local needs for affordable, resilient, high-speed internet connectivity across our county. Next. To accomplish that, the following goals were outlined. Broadband should be available and affordable. Broadband should be reliable and resilient. Broadband should be fast. Next. Tactics to achieve the goals. Invest in open access fiber infrastructure. Let me describe how we define open access. Open access is infrastructure that can be accessed by any entity. Historically, core infrastructure has been controlled by entities that effectively lock others out of markets. Public ownership, or clear assurance of public interest, is a common means for achieving open access. So one of the tactics would be to ensure that whatever public funds go towards developing infrastructure, that it have an open access element, which is preserving the public's interest in that infrastructure. Strategically partner with private sector, modernize existing infrastructure, construct new runs to underserved communities. Next. And finally, grow and strengthen our interconnection facilities, incentivize and attract a multitude of broadband providers, so create competition, and then increase and improve data and analytics, knowing more, having more decision-making power, being able to track and measure our progress, and just having a better overall characterization of how things are going. So those are the tactics, goals, and vision. Another element that has provided very specific focus early on for our process has been the federal and state funding landscape that we're currently in. Responsiveness to these funding opportunities does not represent the sole aim of our strategic planning efforts, but it does represent an expedient opportunity to pilot a case study, to work together, to execute some of the identified tactics, and to realize our shared vision and goals. So what we're going to present at this point is this focused action, essentially a tactic that we've identified to put this model to the test and really address our vision and our goals. Oregon established a broadband office about 5 years ago. It really has only gotten traction in the last 2 or so years. Both LCOG and the county staff are in close contact with that office. The Oregon Broadband Office has a very special role in distributing federal broadband dollars. They are tasked with drafting, vetting, and revising plans and rules in compliance with federal guidelines. They also, at the same time, work in collaboration with all of us who are their potential award recipients. What you see here in front of you on this slide is the latest program rollout schedule from the Oregon Broadband Office. So all of these programs are important and represent opportunities in our region. We're currently focusing on, will you punch the next? We're focusing on the Capital Projects Fund. It goes by quite a few names. The ARPA Fund, or the ARPA Capital Projects Fund, and the state has also referred to it as the Broadband Deployment Program. So those are terms that you'll hear that are synonymous for that opportunity. A key element of the most substantial near-term funding opportunities that are outlined here are the terms served, underserved, and unserved. And those are terms that you may be becoming more and more familiar with. Want to lay out exactly what they mean here in this context. So if you go to the next slide, Keith. they're very strictly defined by the federal government within the bounds of these funding sources. And so as you can see, unserved represents anything that's under 25 megabits download and 3 megabits upload. That is unserved. Served, on the other end of the spectrum, is symmetrical, so both upload and download at 100 megabytes qualifies as served. Unserved is the space that exists in between properly served and unserved. The area of unserved and underserved are those projects that are eligible. The funding source will be focusing on unserved, but will also allow eligible projects for underserved. So these are pretty hard and fast. They have maps that have depicted exactly where you find those things, and so those are the parameters that we're working under. So let's go to the next slide. Another really important element of this project and process is recognition of the necessity for us as public entities to partner with private internet service providers. In Lane County, we are in an enviable position of having a relatively competitive internet service provider environment. Our efforts over the last 2 decades, ours meaning yours and our predecessors, has really created a rich environment for ISPs to thrive, to have interest in coming and have opportunities to grow. Competition is growing and should continue to grow. That is not the case in every region in Oregon. We know the ISPs that are operating in our region. They are tenants in our facility. They are at the table. We have conversations with them. We lease fiber of one form or another to them. We welcome their partnership. We feel strongly that we need their help to accomplish what we need to in the short term, our vision, goals, and tactics. At this point in time, large-scale broadband deployment is genuinely not something that we can go it alone on. We need to align our vision, goals, and offerings with an entity that brings key resources and expertise to a partnership. So put a bit more succinctly, we're looking for a partnership at this point where we have a common geography in mind. We're going to share with you some analysis that we've done through our process of characterizing broadband in the region. We know that there are ISPs operating in certain geographies that align with our focus areas. So that will be an alignment we're looking for. We'll be looking for alignment around service expectation. Our tactics have outlined a standard for speed and reliability that we would seek in a partner. Open access, we've mentioned, these are public dollars. Our pursuit of partnership will be contingent upon meaningfully maintaining a public interest in those assets. We will seek partnership with an entity that acknowledges and reflects our region's broadband goals. We will seek a partner with adequate qualifications and capability. For example, we will be interested in their experience with similar projects and similar partnerships, and we'll certainly want to know about their network, financial, and workforce profiles. This is definitely a time where those are critical considerations. Next. So the question, the internet service providers in seeking partnership will want to have answers to the question, well, what benefit does the public sector bring to the table? One key fundamental element of benefit is that these funding sources, thank heavens, have incorporated as a highly weighted scoring dynamic public partnership. So they will be looking for public partners as a fundamental way to succeed in their pursuit of an award. And so that's one of the things we're offering up is simply that partnership. We avail ourselves to the partnership. Other examples of things that public entities can provide are permitting assistance, coordination assistance within interagencies, right-of-way access, match, cash or in-kind, grant writing administration, public engagement, public support documentation, and reporting, post-award federal reporting. Those are examples. Next. So we've shared some of the context around the visions, goals, and tactics that the regional partners have looked at around this that has been presented to the County Board of Commissioners. I'm going to touch really quickly on a few of the just very practical criteria that the funding source lays out. These are objective. In a sense, it makes it easier to pursue that analysis because they're very specific. They're very for a lot of these, they're rather objective. They give us a clear methodology, let's say, to identify some areas. We talked about and underserved. The number of and underserved is going to be a key criteria for success in any award for pursuing a project. The cost per passing is essentially going to be a variable of the concentration of those and underserved. What does it cost on the whole? How much money are you spending and how many locations have you served with those dollars? And so that concentration is important. The readiness of that project, so the ability to seize on the work that an ISP has done or that we have done. Digital inequity is a variable. We've talked about open access, public benefit, affiliation of the project, the impact that it has regionally, so the reach of that impact is going to be a variable, and then the fact that it adequately avoids what's called overbuild. And Keith's going to speak a little bit to that as we look at the maps and talk about the geography, but essentially it's saying we don't want to spend money where money has already been spent or money is already dedicated to improving certain areas in the area of broadband. So we want to present to you now, and Keith's going to walk us through what I think is a really engaging part of this, which is seeing how the data plays out and where some of these areas of focus really emerge. And so I'm going to turn time over to Keith to take us through that.
Thank you, Jake. So LCOG, in partnership with contractor, have been working with the new imperfect but much improved FCC broadband maps. If you know anything about the old maps, they were based off census tracts and they were just not area specific. So if one user was served in that region, it considered the entire census tract as served. So now we have point-based serviceable locations. And we've worked with a contractor to build out a mapping tool that helps us visualize that. Unfortunately, our license with the FCC and CostQuest, who is the entity that built that data for them, does not allow us to share that in a public forum. But the state has recently released their version of the maps, which is shareable. So that's what I'm going to walk through with you today to give you visualization of the areas we're looking at serving. So this is Lane County as a whole. If you look at the dark green markers, that is areas that are considered fully served, 100 megabit per second symmetrical service up and down. The more aqua color that you see in there is 100 download with a minimum of 20 up. And then the yellow areas are the underserved. So that's between 25, 3, and 100 by 20. And then the brown is anything less than 25 by 3. So an interesting overlay over this that's important for us all to know is that there are other funding mechanisms that have been happening over the last many years. The two primary ones are RDOF and Reconnect. They're USDA programs. And all of the orange polygons that you see up there, those are all current awards in Lane County and outside of as well. But these areas are ineligible for the current federal funding mechanisms. And so while looking at the previous map, you might think that some of these areas are highly and underserved. A lot of them do overlap with some of these awards that have already been put out. So we've identified 4 primary areas for this first round, this first pilot that we're looking at that have a high concentration of and underserved users or serviceable locations. And those red circles are a generalization. This next map will show you a more polygon-based reach of exactly what would get served. And then we'll go into those a little bit closer here so you can see. So the first area is Mabel and Wendling, which is just north of Marcola. And let me pull up what I have here for that. So Mabel has 342 unserved addresses and 105 underserved addresses, 0 served. This area also has a high school that is unserved, Wendling High, and Lane ESD has it set as a priority serviceable location. From their perspective, they would absolutely support this project so that they could get that high school served. Second, just south of Spencer's Butte, this area very carefully is skirts around some of those RDOF and Reconnect awards that I was talking about. But this also has 223 unserved and 45 underserved and also 0 served. Actually, all of our projects that we're looking at here don't have any served addresses, just to be clear on that. And then west of Fall Creek, we have 359 unserved addresses and 36 underserved. And then lastly, just west of Fern Ridge here, we have 306 unserved addresses and 43 underserved addresses. So there are a lot more un- and underserved addresses scattered throughout the county. These areas are high concentrations, what we would consider more slam dunk proposals to the state because the cost per passing will be lower and will be a more bite-sized chunk to get our feet under us before the next wave of funding hits us. And just to show you another area that we might consider, a lot of us have talked about this area. So this is the McKenzie Basin, and to show you kind of the opposite picture, this is a charter territory, and so charter has, in their reporting on the FCC, has reported that they can provide gig by 30 meg upload speeds in this region, everywhere but those little brown dots. So while this is an area that many of you probably all have heard complaints about internet service in the area, because we are beholden to the FCC maps, this area will either need to be challenged or we'll need to address it with other funding. And we've been working with Mike as well as many other partners in the region to look at other potential ways that we can serve this area with resilient high-speed internet. I'm going to turn that back over to Jake.
Thanks, Keith. So the process that we undertook, again, in phase 1 of our project was really, in a sense, to culminate in something like this. This is not the sole culmination. This is not the only project that would emerge from our strategic planning, but this is an opportune and timely opportunity to look at partnership, match it with a funding source, the data that we've put together, and pursue a tactic that addresses the vision and goals. So the next steps that we plan to take at this point, as early as the beginning of next month, we plan to manage a request for proposals. That's essentially a request for partnership, putting out a transparent call to our private partners to see if we can align the way that we described earlier with a private entity. We would then hope to select a partner and start establishing agreements with that partner. And in Q1 of 2024, going back to that rollout schedule, that's when the Oregon Broadband Office plans to issue the notice of funding opportunity for the ARPA Capital Projects Fund, and we would put an application together as regional partners and private partners. So that is the update generally. The project will continue with those other elements of phase 2, the kind of bigger picture elements, but our focus, we felt, would be best spent on this most immediate need that we'll have the beginning of next quarter, Q1 of 2024. And so that's our update, and we welcome conversation and discussion and questions about that.
And thank you for the great presentation. I remind everybody that that presentation, the slides are online. If you go to our agenda and click View Items, you can go directly to the slides that were just covered. I'll turn it over to the board for questions and or comments, and I suspect, and I have a hunch that Commissioner Buck would like to start.
Oh, sure, we can do that.
Since we've been kind of chatting back and forth a little bit.
We have, because before we started this, we were just chatting because I don't have the greatest internet at my place. And So I feel the pain of a lot of these folks out there that don't have access. At least I get some, but sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. It's been my pleasure to be a part of the early conversations to get you all to this point. Although you've done all the work, I was just sitting in the room and soaking it up. I'm really excited about these 4 different areas that you're starting with. It is challenging not to be able to have access to those maps that I would really like to be able to see. And the more we can figure out how to make that public, so people know where, services may be coming in the future and where they're already served, because I would say most people don't know that information and don't really know where to look for that information. They just know it's not working for them. So if there's a way that we can make that easily accessible to people, that would be movement in the right direction. But otherwise, you've been able to have this presentation at the LCOG board meetings and trying to get the word out to electeds around the county. And I think they would be excited to see the reach go out in even further into our rural areas as well. Thank you, Jeff.
And thank you, Commissioner Buck. And, one reason I asked Commissioner Buck to begin is those of us who have it take it for granted, right? I live in Bethel, kind of the hub of the entire world as far as I'm concerned. And we have great service out there, have had for a long time. But you don't have to go very far, just to the other side of Fernridge Lake to find a void completely. Just a few miles away, people in the same school district don't have the same services. And, it's just commendable. What's happened since the middle mile was first announced. Was that 5 years ago? Is that what you said? When?
I feel like I've been saying 5 for 2-3 years, so it's probably more like 6 or 7 years now, but yeah.
I think it was Sarah Majewski that helped us initially with that, who's now Sarah Means, who's with the state. And, it all seems so futuristic at the time, and now you're really right in the heart of getting everybody served, and that is really, truly exciting. Because it's like I say, you have kids coming in from outside of Elmira, not Elmira, but El Salvador, coming into the Bethel School District, into a classroom with kids who have the service and kids who can't go home and do the homework sometimes based upon the fact that they can't get the support that we all take for granted. Now, I still have my Encyclopedia Britannica, and that's where I go, of course. Further questions or comments? Commissioner Senega.
When I was really shocked, like Chair Farr said, on the campaign trail to hear how big of a deal this is out in our rural areas. I live outside Junction City. We've always had great internet, and people can't telecommute, people can't pay bills, and it's a really big deal. And I was curious because that started a lot of conversations, and I've talked to some different fiber optic companies. Is fiber optics, in your guys' opinion, is it definitely the future and is going to last? Because there's people that are concerned about pouring this money into this infrastructure that is going to be outdated, as you guys know how quickly technology changes. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on that.
I'll let Keith take a crack at that as the kind of a technical expert amongst us here, but I think we'll all have observations.
So the nice thing about fiber optics is that the limits of fiber optics are theoretical at this point in time. It's limited by the lasers that you point down the fiber optic cable. So I know of examples where they've actually been able to transmit petabit of data over fiber optics, which is an unfathomable amount of data that a last mile service would need. And I know that equipment that was put out 5 years ago versus today, is vastly different in the speed offerings that it can provide to last mile providers. So all that to say is it's going to last us a very long time. It's much more scalable than any technology that we've used in the past.
Okay, so it sounds like once you get the cable, the infrastructure in, what's on both ends can be upgraded and use the same cable.
Scalability was
To
what
a
I was-
construction mindset, that works.
And I wanted to mention, of course, I'm old enough my first computer had 64K of memory. A gigabyte of memory was unfathomable at the time. But I guess that is the point, that scalability is relative and it's moving faster. But I also want to mention what's great about fiber optics, it is light going through that, so it's a very low friction use, right? Even electricity puts current through wire and it wears out after a while. So as far as being a resilient infrastructure, it lasts a decade. It's the gold standard for infrastructure.
It also doesn't have a signal-to-noise ratio problem like traditional copper or cable infrastructure. So if you have high voltage transmission lines that run right next to it, you can actually run high voltage touching fiber optics, and it wouldn't do anything to it.
As long as somebody doesn't dig through it, right?
Dig through it will still break it, yes.
I think another element of resilience is all these things that have been mentioned, and you'll hear the kind of wireless versus fiber conversation. I think wireless is always going to be a part of the conversation, sort of on those edges, because now is the time that folks need internet, and that solution may be wireless for a time, but fiber optic cable is always going to stand up any wireless network. Its strength is going to come from its proximity to physical fiber in the ground, and so it's not independent. It is dependent upon fiber optic cable, and so when you deploy fiber, you strengthen the reach of any wireless solution that then further strengthens the reach, and so.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, one of the complaints I heard was there's fiber optic going right in front of my house, but I can't get it to my house. What do you see for solutions in that?
You hear that a lot, and because it's like, well, it's not exactly as simple as plumbing, where we just go out and,
Get to a
get
pedestal or
a
something.
key off of. Keith, again, probably has a better technical answer to that. The places where these interconnections happen, these hubs are expensive. They have to be strategic. And so finding the places where those, what we call laterals, happen, it has to be strategic and justified. And so it's not quite as easy as I just want to get the internet right there,
You can't glue a T in.
So there's two things that I can speak to there. So yes, I've heard something very similar, and I actually have personal experience with a friend. I helped him dig an 8th mile trench to Emerald Broadband's fiber last Saturday. So I have very personal experience, because that would have been a $12,000 bill from the broadband provider, which we were able to do it for a lot cheaper because we dug the trench and laid the conduit. But I've definitely heard that people are having trouble with, hey, the fiber's there, but the hookup fee's too much. The good thing about the funding models that are out right now is it requires standard hookup fees. So, and they have to be able to do it within a standard window. So if somebody's getting these federal dollars, they have to be ready to put up the money to build the laterals when somebody asks for a hookup.
Awesome.
That's an impressive trench.
It was long.
This weekend.
What are you doing this?
I'm still feeling it.
I'll bet. That is, depending, if you did that out in my neck of the woods, Bethel, boy, you would have a tough time going more than a couple inches in the ground. That's impressive. That's 220 yards. Wow.
Maybe a more optimistic answer, bouncing off of what Keith has shared, is that the fact that you do have fiber nearby means that there will be a solution soon. Just in this current environment, that's a big deal that you have fiber in the area.
Follow up, Commissioner Buck. Go ahead.
I am curious if there are any available subsidies for homeowners to get that last connection to their home, because $12,000 is way too much for most people to be able to afford to connect, and knowing that it's so essential to our daily life. And I'm also getting messages that this will be very good for emergency alerts or other safety, public safety situations. So I was hoping you could touch on that a little bit.
Not aware of any.
Yeah, I mean, what I immediately came to mind was the Affordable Connectivity Program, the ACP, which is a subsidy for the service itself. These grant funds are intended to provide last mile. They are intended to be one answer to so the areas that we identified as focus areas would be recipients of essentially the subsidy through a grant process. broader subsidies, I'm not aware of any outside of the grant processes that we're pursuing for last mile connectivity. It would be a critical gap filling solution to provide ways so that friends don't have to dig trenches on the weekend, so that Keith gets his weekends back, yeah.
I might call on Keith.
It's not a service that I
Keith want to
provide.
put out his phone number as a public entity service or something?
A card?
I will say that I know of at least one entity, I'm not going to call names out on ISPs, but I do know of at least one entity that did not mark their service area as served addresses in the FCC database if they had not ran their last mile extensions to make that money available, because they weren't doing standard hookups on those, because they knew that in that particular area they were going to be doing a lot of half mile to quarter mile to, pretty expensive laterals into their fiber system. So while the fiber's on the street, technically there's addresses that are listed in that same service area that could be available for funding strategically.
So they didn't overstate their
Exactly.
presence.
Yeah.
Which is a stand-up thing to do.
And not everyone did that.
Emergency services, how does it affect that?
There are a number of fire districts that a lot of these projects will pass. And I think that's probably the biggest one that I'm aware of.
I can't speak specifically to the projects, but as a general, on a general basis, back to fiber underpins all of the infrastructure. It's fiber to our radio towers, once on a tower, they can use microwave to get it back and forth, and as we experience in fires or, other natural events, losing a tower means our emergency responders can't get connectivity. So that's how it supports it. But it also is fiber and infrastructure to dams. So much of our infrastructure today runs by wire, and that wire is broadband and fiber connectivity. So in a general statement, anywhere we're running connectivity to, it bolsters the opportunity and ability to support emergency response and emergency communication in those areas.
I would just add that there is trying to solve the problems that we can with the funds available, but there's always a premium on buried solutions. So there's an area in our county where service has been restored, but is technically as vulnerable as it was before. And so the idea of underground solutions that have better resiliency to our changing dynamic in these forested areas is something that's at the fore. It's a conversation driver and something that it's more expensive to do, but it solves the problem more finally.
We're also in close contact with ODOT and Oregon Hazards Lab about their placements for cameras and IT solutions that help benefit public safety. So anywhere that we pass, we'll be looking at seeing if they have projects that they want to add to.
That being said, it doesn't take much ground movement to completely interrupt service, does it? In the event of a
I don't have
massive
a
subduction.
perfect understanding of how seismic activity, certainly it's vulnerable.
If it severs, it would have to sever the line to. Vice Chair Trigger.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I almost wasn't going to ask because I'm so new to this topic, and I'm not even sure how to frame the question or if the question even applies, but I figure that's probably true for lots of people who might be watching too, so I'll go ahead. So that last line of questioning makes me think about, are there opportunities for sort of efficiency of scale or piggybacking projects around trenching and digging with other utilities as we make an effort to move toward more underground solutions for other utilities and other ways of connecting?
You see us all get excited at that question. It's an excellent question. I don't know if, Mike, you want to take a crack at it, or?
I can start at the high level. So that's what you're referring to as dig once, or policies that support, driving infrastructure that hinges on other work that's already going on. But dig once is a big one. And so at a high level, yes, that is very much on, most any public agency's mind, and certainly ours. and exploring that, and there's the onesie twosies that you come across and you hear about, and you look to capitalize on those to help to, and there's one active right now that we're focused on with a great partner. But I think in general, that's a place where, that costs money, right? So the expensive part is digging the trench. That's the most cost. But then you still need funding available at that time because it's very time critical. They're going to open it and close it, and it runs like a clock on a very tight schedule, especially here with our winters and weather and such. So having funding set aside and available up front where we can capitalize on that and get infrastructure in the ground when it's open is an important thing to, that's one of the aspects of the work that we are continuing to explore and look for opportunities with that out there. So at a high level, that's what's going on.
I mean, I think that was a perfect response. I noted those entities that are coordinating in some regard. That's one of the things that has emerged as this really clear need. It was the Dig Once was identified as a phase 2 focus to, we've got to figure this out so that we can seize opportunities. We're kind of scrapping together solutions to these opportunities, but there's a more elegant way to do it. And we have the partnership, we have the coordination, we just need to dial some things in. So it's absolutely on the mind and it's a tactic to achieve vision and goals.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I guess I'd add too that one of the keys to doing that is knowing exactly where you want to have infrastructure in the ground. Yeah. And so part of our process here, as we phase into these kind of wrapping up our project, will be identifying long-term needs of where we expect that we need buried fiber or just buried communication conduits, not just in rural Lane County, but also in the metropolitan areas so that we can coordinate on all that work. So that we're not just putting conduit to nowhere, because it's easy to do that if you just do that in every open trench, and then it's just wasted funds.
Sort of the broadband equivalent of the transportation system plan, right? The key corridors, the places where investment should be focused, and so.
So to that, if I may, one more question. If we went back to the slide that has the sort of timeline, or the line that shows unserved at the far left, if I'm that
Oh,
one.
you're talking about this one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ultimately, if we served all the unserved people, they would become served, right? It's not an incremental. You're either served or you're not served in terms of what we're trying to address here, right? So that picture would change to where we would, in theory, drop the entire left side of that off, and everybody would be some measure of underserved or served. Right? Just making sure I understand.
Yeah.
And is there any sort of ancillary effect or benefit? I mean, it's not like a Wi-Fi where if you're closer to the signal, you can kind of pick up on it a little bit, even though it's not technically your Wi-Fi, right? Like I can see my neighbor's Wi-Fi signal if I need their password. This is because it's directly physically connected to the address, there isn't that kind of effect. So we're not like sweeping up some underserved folks in the course of serving unserved, right?
I'll take a crack at this and then you can take a crack at it. Broadband is terrestrial and wireless, right? So wireless would be a signal that so long as there's a sufficient line of sight between a radio tower and a receiver, those are always going to be a part of a solution on the edge. And so I think that's part of what you're getting at is this idea of like there will be a sort of gradient. The fiber is our goal. A private ISP may come back and say, yes, fiber is our goal too. Look what we can do with this edge wireless solution. And it will dissipate on the fringes, but at this point will meet the requirement for, I think that will be something that we'll likely encounter as part of solutions.
Okay.
Because it will get people service that they don't have now. And hopefully it's a process that gets them eventually further down.
Great, thank you.
I would also expect that we'll see some lifting up of communities behind. So like anywhere that we're passing to get to a community, we'll probably see some served addresses that spring up outside of the service area that we're trying to hit.
Great. Thank you very much.
You know, one of the reasons I like being around people in your profession is because you're always looking for what is the emerging technology, what's the next thing that's going to happen, and what will make what we have now obsolete, which, you know, well, I came from England where we didn't have dial phones, you know, and I came to America where we had dial phones, and now you'd be hard pressed to find a dial phone. You know, I mean, things do emerge very, very quickly. But I work for a little hardware store, and we got the first point-of-sale computerized system, Jerry's. It was a little hardware store at the time. And we put the wires in, and at great expense and effort, we had to run these wires all over the. Then when we built the next store, we put empty conduits in because we thought we might need wires at some time. And as we built more stores, we add more empty conduits, most of which were planned out, and none of them ever lay dormant or fallow. But, you know, always trying to anticipate what the next thing is. And we had forward-thinking people. Our IT department, which was unusual for a small Ace Hardware store in West Eugene, thinking about what is next. And it really allows you to get ahead of the technology and not plan obsolete systems into the future, but plan obsolete systems into the new systems that become the next wave. And who knows when Star Trek's going to show up, you know? I mean, I have a 7-year-old grandson who is pretty sure that based on his study, he can invent a battery that will never wear out. and he's shown me exactly how it's magnetic, you know, it uses magnetic fields. And I don't know what he's talking about, but he does. And, you know, so in the future, you know, I mean, what is going to be the next thing that's going to make everything that we're doing now obsolete? But in the meantime, we have to make the most and make sure there's no underserved population or no unserved population, and do the best that we can with the technology that we have. And that's why I love being around you, because that's what you do all the time. You're thinking about that. This guy right here, I get to stand in his shadow daily, you know, just thinking about the way things are moving, progressing so rapidly. So with that, any further comments or questions? Bravo, wonderful presentation.
Exciting. Thank you. Thank you very much.
He does, he has his battery.
I believe in him.
He's only got just 3.7 volts at this point, but, you know, at some point. Okay, Mr. Mokrice, we're going to move down our agenda to Commissioner's Business. And do we have any announcements from the Commissioners? Nothing earth shaking at this point in time? So
Mayor's Review Art Show's coming up here, week, Springfield.
on Friday night, isn't it? This coming Friday.
Yeah, it's Friday, yeah, that's right, right. It's
And I'll
already
be
this
camping
week.
at Siosla Marina.
I'll be in Texas at a wedding.
Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I know you know about this, and there's been some media about it, but we are having the South Lane Clinic groundbreaking Thursday morning at 9 a.m. Everybody's invited. It's a celebration for them to start the renovations. And I know Chair Farr is also going to join us in the evening to appreciate all the partners that have been involved in creating this great project for our first rural health clinic. I'm excited to be there. Hopefully people can come.
Well, my big asterisk we were talking about a little bit ago, that on Thursday I have jury duty planned. So I'm gonna either get out. You don't get out of jury duty. You postpone it. I think I'm gonna be able to postpone it so I can attend all of the South Lane.
You'll be like Miss Moody this morning.
Get let out of the pen, I think is the terminology that was used. All right. Any further announcements? Then we'll move along to assignments. Commissioner Lovell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In the haste of getting time crunched in a meeting, Travel Lane County folks had requested that we remember to file their one-year extension to their grant agreement and to bring it to a full 3-year term. They're requesting that so they can hit the ground running and have lots of opportunity ahead of them to do the best job that they can. So I just want to remind us that we need to do that.
I got head nods all around. Very good. Any further assignment requests? Should be very easy, Mr. Mokrice, to review assignments.
Well, just that one from Commissioner Lovell to bring back to the board approval of the Traveling County grant renewal decision.
Okay, and then we are disposed of executive sessions for the day today. Do we have any other business to attend to for this edition of the Board of County Commissioners meeting? Otherwise, I bid you all a fond adieu, and we are adjourned.